Welcome to Amanda Hall's Psychic, a weekly mini workshop each week here on a Wednesday afternoon, directly after my show out of the US of A in Washington, where I have a little show on A1R Psychic Radio on Moonstruck TV, where we have a half-hour event where we talk about many things connected to psychic events and psychic phenomena in the world, and we have a little mini astrology lesson. We have the Simply Tarot card of the week. We also have a candle of the week, and we have a little trip around the universe. Plus, we also perform 2 free readings in the half-hour show. This week, though, I don't do readings here, and I'd like to welcome everybody here. For those of you that have just joined, my name is Amanda Hall Psychic. I've been in the psychic industry here in Australia for well over 40 years. I have been inducted into the Psychic Hall of Fame in 2013. And for the 4th year in a row, I was voted by the public as Australia's top psychic of the year. So I feel very honoured and very humble for that. And I want to thank everybody that did vote for me. It's a real honour. And so what I'm endeavouring to do with these little mini workshops each week after my show on A1R Psychic Radio and Moonstruck TV is to help educate the public on topics that may be of interest to them, but also teach you how to work with my lovely soy candles that I designed a couple of years ago, and they are hand poured. They are created with the most eco-soy friendly soy on the planet. We use lead-free wicks. Everything about them is natural as we can possibly make them. So there's something that they are not necessarily a decorative candle. They are a candle to help improve your life. I call them intent, purpose, and direction. And this week my mini workshop is called My Angel in the Sky. Now, the reasons why I've chosen this, I've written the formula out for the shows for the coming 6 months. This was the candle that I decided to use at this particular time, not knowing what was going to transpire in the world in the last week, where we've had dreadful bushfires here in Tathra. We've also had a terrible cyclone in Darwin. But for our darling friends in the US that have had yet again another school shooting, and look, my heart is sick. Why can't we stop this terrible tragedy and carnage of our young people? I don't know. They've got to do something about their gun laws over there, and that's my personal opinion. But also they've had some terrible bombings in Texas. So, you know, it's interesting how the universe aligns, or our spirit guides align things that we're going to be working with, or the tools that we're going to be working with as psychics and healers, that they align with the events that are happening in the universe. So without further ado, I will introduce the candles that I'm working with this week, and they are called My Angel in the Sky. Now, the reason why I designed this particular candle was after many, many requests of people asking me, Amanda, it would be so lovely if we had a particular candle that we could burn that would represent our loved ones that are no longer with us, something that we could use at times of celebrations, at Christmas time, Easter, birthdays, anniversaries, just that special family gathering. And it would be nice if we had something that we could burn daily if we chose to. We could put it next to their photo, or we could just bring it out for special occasions. So I gave it a lot of thought, and I have a team of guides that I work with, and I remember asking them over a series of days, look, I really need guidance on this. I've got to get this right. This is probably going to be the most important candle in our range, and it's something that has to be right across the board, that it's not meant to be denominational, connected with religion or personal beliefs. It's about honouring those that are no longer with us, that are really important and special to us. You know, and it's usually at a time, you know, of great sadness. And even when somebody's been gone a long, long time, that sadness still lingers in some form or another. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, as invariably I get woken up when my guides want to have a little chat or give me some, you know, earth-changing information, which this was earth-changing, I feel. They gave me the name My Angel in the Sky. And I thought, what a lovely name. That'll make a night, you know, it's a lovely name for the candle. Then they went on to give me the fragrance and the colour and things like that. And we've chosen white as the colour of the candle because I believe that that's the purity of our angels in the sky. And they truly are our angels. And it's got a beautiful, soft, subtle perfume. I can't remember the fragrance off the top of my head, but I know it's very subtle, and it is on my website for those of you that want to know what it is. But it's a very soft fragrance. It's a candle that I burn I burn one of these fairly regularly, but I do particularly burn them at the time of the year when it's Christmas, birthdays, Easters, anniversaries of passing of particular family members. And for those of you that know me, I lost my husband over 30 years ago now, and it was his birthday in the last couple of weeks. So in his honour, I had this candle burning on his birthday and also his Pisces candle. And my late husband was a big one on birthday, so I made sure I had a few candles going. And it's always been a family tradition that we always had a birthday cake even after he was gone. And my children are long grown now and left home and on with their own lives. But I still have a birthday cake for my late husband. As silly as that might sound, but it's just my tradition. And for those of you that might need a travel pack that are going traveling and want something that you can take with you, that it's easy. At Christmas time, I had half a dozen of these scattered around everywhere, just burning delicately in the background so that they weren't taking up space on my festive table for Christmas, but they were subtly going in the background. And everybody that was here at home knew what they were for. But, I often saw people stop, ponder, have a little special moment with that special someone that they'd lost. And it was like their opportunity to remember them in a positive sort of way without everybody else needing to know what was happening. It was their sort of little very personal time. I'd like to talk a little bit about grief. Now, grief is one of these areas that most of us we deal with it, but we don't want to talk about it. We sort of look at it and we think, oh, that's someone else's problem. And I suppose for me, having never really experienced much in the way of grief until I lost my husband and I was only in my late 20s, and I'm not ashamed to say that was the very first funeral I'd ever been to in my life. Everybody else that had passed away in my family that had happened when I was a very little girl, and I hadn't been exposed to too much death from the time of about 8 or 9. And at that age, my family never took children to funerals, so I wasn't sure what would happen. And when it did happen to me, and it was a very overwhelming experience. I mean, yes, of course, I was dreadfully upset. I'd lost my husband. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I had 2 small children. But I think the most overwhelming thing for me was I had no idea what to expect. It wasn't something that people talked about. It was, yes, this terrible sadness, but it was also, how do you go about telling small children that daddy's not coming home again? That daddy's gone to the angels, that, God's come and taken him, whatever your belief may be. And I can remember thinking, oh my heavens, I don't know what to do. And I wasn't living on the eastern seaboard. I was living in Western Australia at the time, and I had no family there. I had a handful of close friends, but I did not have any family in the West. And it was sort of fairly early in the morning when I discovered my husband and he was taken away. And I thought I hadn't even had time to give my children breakfast at that point. And I can remember thinking, what do I do next? I rang some close friends and they came, and my girlfriend came in and she said, right, what were you going to do this morning? And I said, oh, well, I was going to get up and cook breakfast. It was the weekend and we always had bacon and eggs on a Saturday and a Sunday morning. That was a family tradition. She said, right, where's the frying pan? We're going to cook breakfast. And I looked at her stupid, thinking, why would anybody want to eat? And she said, we're going to get some food into those little ones' tummies before we break the news to them. She said, we're going to do what you said you were going to do today. What else was on the agenda? And I looked at her strange and I shrugged my shoulders and I said, I don't really understand why you're talking about what were we going to do. Peter's gone and I'm really devastated. I'm upset and I'm crying and whatever, and probably had a cigarette in one hand and a coffee in the other at this point. And she said to me, we need to make this as normal as possible before their world gets tipped upside down. And I said, oh, well, we were going to make chocolate chip cookies. She said, good, we're still going to make chocolate chip cookies. She said, that'll give us time to think. So we went ahead, we cooked breakfast, we fed the children, we made chocolate chip cookies, and we tried to keep everything as normal and happy and as jovial as possible with Auntie Laura. And while she was busy with the children working on the chocolate chip cookies, it gave me a chance to go and speak to, our relatives back east and inform them of what had happened. And I suppose during that time, I was looking for a magical way to share it with my children to ease the burden. And of course, nobody had any suggestions because no one had ever had to do that in my family. So again, it was back to me. And the only thing I could think of was tell them the truth. I sat them down, I told them the truth and told them that Daddy had been sick for quite a while, and they knew that, and that, his time had come to go to the angels. Look, I don't know whether that was right, wrong, or indifferent, or the best way to tell them, but that was my way of doing it. And why I'm sharing this story with you is I want you to understand that there is nothing that's right or wrong. It comes back to what is personal for us. And I mean, yes, that was a very difficult time in my life. And I look back at it now and I think I must have just been swallowed up by the angels above, looking after me and helping me and guiding me to get through this very difficult time, to know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect when it came to the time of the funeral, and what was protocol and what wasn't, and how much, are you allowed to tell people you don't want flowers, donate some money to the cancer research or the blind society or whatever the case may be. And there's so many things that you have to go through at that time, and so many questions you have to answer, and you sort of do feel very overwhelmed and you feel very unprepared. And I know I felt very unprepared for the questions that were asked. Things like my husband's family, his parents' names and birth dates and where they married and where they were born and things like that, things that I couldn't answer because I didn't know. And it took me then to sort of realise then that, hang on a minute, we don't do enough communicating about what to do in a situation like this. And I suppose for me, being so very young in my late 20s, it was a big learning curve. It did make me sort of research and try to understand a little bit more about grief and how different cultures and different people deal with grief. And from my own personal experience, the one thing that I learned out of this, that everybody grieves differently. Some people get angry, some people withdraw, some people laugh, some people pretend it didn't happen. They just don't ever speak about it again. It's like that person disappeared off the face of the earth, never to be just spoken about, remembered, a picture of, or anything ever again. That's their personal way of dealing with it. Other people want to talk about it a lot. And a lot of people ignore you, or they're there for the first couple of weeks. And then after that, it's like you've got leprosy. They avoid talking to you because they don't know what to say. They don't know what's the right thing to do. And if I can remember one thing that really nearly drove me insane was people would say, oh, it only takes time. And I remember thinking to myself, if I hear that one more time, I'm going to smack the next person across the face. I don't want to hear that it only takes time. In time, you'll be right. Yes, time is a great healer, but that's not comforting words to someone that's just had loss. It doesn't help anything. The best thing you can do is be there for them. You don't necessarily have to say anything, just be there. Don't bring them up and say, are you okay? Of course they're not okay. Bring them up and say, well, I was thinking of going for a walk down the beach. Would you like to join me? And they'll either say yes or no. And if they come and they walk down the beach with you and they don't utter a word, well, you just know that that's how it's meant to be. And if they want to talk and cry and talk about, what they did and what they didn't do and how they're missing that person, or it's their birthday next week, just let them talk. Don't feel that we've got to have the right answers or the right solutions to grief, because there is no right solutions. There is no right answers. During the time of my early widowhood, I remember trying to read everything that I could possibly find on grief and how to handle it, and particularly how to handle children's grief. In those days, there was very little work done in that area. And I remember stumbling across some books written by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and one in particular called On Death and Dying. And that became such a comfort to me. It was a book that I read and reread and reread and reread as she talks about the different stages of grief, that how you get caught in the initial part is the overwhelming sadness, and then you go through the denial, you go through the reasoning, if I'd only done this, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And then you go through things like wearing an outfit that they hated, because it's almost like your way of getting back at them for you feeling so miserable, so lost, so alone. And she talks about, the different stages of grief and how we can get locked up in certain areas, and there is no bus timetable. There's no magic time that says this is going to get better, or, you're going to stop hurting, or the pain's going to go away. That's a very personal and a very individual thing. For me, the most comforting words I ever heard was one day I was at a bus stop with my children waiting to catch a bus to somewhere, and this lady that was sitting there, and she was an older lady, she's probably in her 80s, she looked up at me and she said, "One day, darling, the sky will be blue." And I looked at her and I said, "Do you think so?" And she said, "Yes, I know so," as she touched my hand. And I knew that she knew what I was going through. That's all she had to say to me. And I remembered those words all of my life. And they were the most comforting words that anybody ever shared with me, because what she was telling me was that one day I would get up and the sky would be blue and I would have a smile in my heart again, and that I would be able to take the reins to my life and move forward. And I remember thinking that this overwhelming pain in my heart would never go away. Well, I can assure you, yes, it does go away. And I don't think it ever goes away completely. I think we put it in a little box and we put it somewhere, and it's never too far away. But I feel over time, I think that pain sort of then starts to change to, instead of being sad, we have the happy memories that start flooding in. You know, we can listen to a song on the radio that actually we don't burst into tears over, but it takes us back to a time and a place with somebody that we lost, and we can have a giggle about it, or we can feel very close to them. And grief is, as I said, a very personal thing. And look, I can honestly say to you, even after 30 years, I still have bad days. There is no such thing as you're ever completely cured. It's how you learn to get on with your life and still honor that person in a loving, constructive, positive way, and honor the fact that you have allowed to have a broken heart. You are allowed to be brokenhearted. You are allowed to be sad. You are allowed to be disappointed, angry with them. You know, you are allowed to be angry that how dare they leave you. You know, all of a sudden, you haven't got that special someone to pick up the phone and talk to. And that can be very taxing, whether it's a partner or whether it's, I couldn't begin to imagine what it would be like to lose a child. I think that would have to be the worst pain, the worst loss of all. Thankfully, I've never had to go through that. I've been through a lot of loss and tragedy in my life, but certainly not that. And I'm very grateful that I haven't experienced that. But for all of us, there's all different types of grief. And that takes me on to the weather events that happened here in Australia just in this last 7 days. You know, the fires, those people that have lost their homes, they've lost all their treasured memories, the things that made them smile, you know, their children's first steps, their photographs, their drawings, their paintings, their whatevers, their keepsakes from their parents, whatever it might be. Those things, they're going to go through grief in a different way to the loss of a person, but it's still real grief. And the same in Darwin with, you know, the cyclone going through there, and their lives have gone, and most of their stuff will either be destroyed or water damaged or irreplaceable or unretrievable. So they're going to go through their own grief. And then, of course, the people in Texas with these bombings and the families that's affected, they're going to go through the grief of whether they've lost somebody, or even just the point that they could have lost somebody, and that their lives, their town is, their area is no longer safe. And finally, we go to Maryland in the USA, where, you know, another shooting at a school. You know, what those families and school children and teachers and staff are going to go through is horrendous. We can't even begin to imagine what their grief is going to be like. So I'd like to wrap it up there. I hope that it's been of some help to you. For those of you that might want to purchase some candles, you can head to my website, amandahallpsychic.com.au, and if you type Facebook into the coupon box at the checkout in capital letters, you will get a discount on any of our services. Next week, we're going to be working with the full moon in Libra. So I hope you can join us again next week, and I hope you've really enjoyed my little bit of a personal talk about grief and how we should honour and remember. Happy days. See you next week. Bye for now.